I'd like to introduce a good friend and one of our founding members of the Barnabas Group, graduated in our first class, Lindsay Spathy, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Lindsay?
Well, great. Thank you, Jim. I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine and a friend of several of the Barnabas Group members here today, in Colonel Dale Buckner. Colonel Buckner served an illustrious and highly decorated career in the U.S. military, a 25-year career, in fact, where he commanded special forces and counterintelligence, counter-terrorist groups in some of the darkest places on the globe. Since retiring from the military, he founded a company called Global Guardian located in 81 different countries, where he protects corporations, ministries, and individuals and families, and currently protecting the U.S. ski team as they compete in Korea. So without further ado, let's give Colonel Dale Buckner a warm Barnabas welcome, shall we?
Good afternoon, everybody. I will be the outlier of the day. I'm going to walk around quite a bit as we go through this. I have 20 minutes to give you a global perspective that many of you will not agree with, based on kind of where you sit, where you grew up, what your parents instilled in you, where you sit politically. As I go through this, my challenge and your challenge is to divorce yourself of all of those things. As I go through this is exactly what I try and do. I do, based on my background, have a very different optic of the world than you will, based on those things. So as I go through this, there are pieces and parts of this you might not agree with. There are pieces and parts of this that you might not understand. I am telling you this purely from a perspective of running around the world and as an executor of policy, what I've seen, what I've dealt with, and my message to you is twofold. Number one, whether you are a parent, CEO, leader of a group, the world is changing at a pace that no one can keep up with. No one. There's not a CEO that I advise that has kept up with in protecting his organization. Two, be prudent. I've heard a very positive message all day today, and it's uplifting, and I'm happy to be part of it, and I'm happy to support members and groups within Barnabas. It's great. But be prudent. As we go through and you look at what's happening in the world, you have to ask yourself and open yourself up to the suggestion that the world has changed and is not the place you think it is or what you want it to be. And that's hard. It's uncomfortable at times. I heard comments about the devil today. It is real. I have seen it. I have destroyed it physically. I'm not proud of that. I don't brag about it, and there's nothing great about it, but it is real. I heard a joke about getting arrested in Iran today, and in that context, I laugh myself, and it is funny, and it could be a good wake-up call for your children and millennials. But the simple reality is I've had to take people out of Asia, I've had to take people out of Venezuela recently, and I've had to get people that have been kidnapped, 8 of them, in the last 3 years out of situations that you don't want to talk about, and they're not laughing matters. Be prudent. Here's the macro thesis of this. As you look at what's going on, the simple thesis is this. We all need to think about, as parents and leaders, how we protect our people, that's your organization or your family, how you protect your infrastructure, and how you protect your communications, i.e. cyber, and all of us, and our children, and our employees, and how we protect information in the cyber domain. All of it is now connected. You cannot separate these out. It is impossible. All of you are very educated, very smart, very successful. You can be in this room. All the things on that slide under the cause, you are all very well educated on. You read it in the newspaper on Sunday. You hear it on the radio in your car when you leave here. You see it on the news every night. All of us live in a bubble in which we judge. I do it myself. I'm no longer out there running around the world executing U.S. policy. All of us watch the news, because I did it last night. I'm watching the news, and I'm watching the Florida story. I'm judging. That politician's that smart, that politician is wrong, this is good policy, this is bad policy, and I judge. We all do it. We're trying to frame it within our value system. As we go through this, we're all educated on those causes. But how often do you stop and think about, and this is the hard part, how often do you stop and digest all of those things going on all around you every day and ask yourself a very simple question? The question is, so what? What does it all mean, and how do I live my life, and how do I protect what I have around me and in my future? As we go through a couple of these, the effect is what keeps me up at night. I don't worry about nuclear weapons being stolen in Pakistan and finding their way to the United States, because I know the reality of that. I know the systems in place. That's not what keeps me up at night. What keeps me up at night are changes in the globe and populations and communication. And what does that mean? The disenfranchised, the first one listed up there, have a vote that they have never had before. If you're a poor child in India, Mexico, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, pick a country right here in the United States. If you're born into the caste system in India and the best you could ever do is be the butler of a wealthy family, because of cell phones and the internet, that population is realizing they have a vote. Most Americans have no idea that India is now the number 2 highest rated country for kidnap and ransom in the world. That 10-year-old is now incentivized to take you because he can make more money in 48 to 70 hours by kidnapping you or your employee or your family member than they could in the next 3 decades. We're not thinking in those terms, and it's happening every day. As you look at a few of those, and I don't want to spend too much time on them, mobility. If you travel to Europe very often, Europe's mobility used to be one of its greatest assets. It is now its greatest liability. We do not control borders. We do not control people. We do not control weapons. We do not control drugs. We don't control any of it, and it's falling apart. You can make that argument right here in the United States. We could spend the next 2 hours talking about that. It is an issue that we're not keeping up to. Urbanization. In Los Angeles, about 8 million people. In LA and in their surrounding areas. About 14 million people in New York City in the 5 boroughs. In our hemisphere, there is urbanization, and I call it a super city, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. If you've traveled to Sao Paulo, there are 25 million people living in and around Sao Paulo. In the future, there's going to be a lot of super cities. And my question to you is, super cities have really deep, dark problems. 40% of Sao Paulo is completely ungoverned. Sewer, water, electricity, the grid, the communication grid, none of it is managed by the government, which means there is a vacuum that is filled by cartels and gangs and groups. Can you imagine if we plugged another 10, 15 million people into LA? Do you think the government can control that and manage it right here in Los Angeles, or another 10 to 15 million in New York, or any other city in this country? Will we fight in super cities? Can we manage in super cities? All of that is a challenge. It's a huge opportunity for this room, but it is a challenge. It's real. I'll come back to this. I don't want to tell you or be over-alarmist. If you like Europe, go to Europe. If you like Mexico, go to Mexico. If your child is getting an MBA and you want to give them a college gift to travel Europe or Asia, go. My message is simply acknowledge this. Terrorism in Europe was up 650% last year. It is real. I've had to go get 92 of my clients in Paris during the attacks. It's real. I've had to get clients off the London Bridge during those attacks. It's real. Just account for it. Know how you're going to get out, and if you're injured, know how you're getting home. It matters. Kidnapping. This is going to go up and up and up. There was just yesterday announced that there is now a task force of CIA and special operations running around the Middle East trying to account for all the Americans that were killed by ISIS. Kidnapping in Venezuela is exploding as a business model, as the nation is now a failed nation. It is Somalia in our hemisphere. If you're going to go do work in places like that, I applaud you, but be prudent. Think through what that means to go to Iran. Think through what it means to go to North Korea. and simply guard and mitigate that risk. It matters, whether you're a parent or a leader. Europe and the United States. I have clients and CEOs that literally after every one of these attacks will call me and say, Dale, is this the last one? Are we going to go back to normal? Does anything look like that is not the new normal to you? I had someone walk up to me this morning and say, we haven't had a school shooting in the United States in a long time. Anybody see the stat in the news on what the school shootings have been? There's been 45 of them in the last few months. You just don't see it. It's not on the news because it's not 15 people killed, 17 people, it's onesies and twosies. That number actually of 20 million, new report came out last week, that number is now 30 million. The largest human capital movement since World War II has now moved into Europe. There are parts and pieces of London, Paris, Belgium, so on and so forth, where the police and the military will not go in with less than 40 members. That is real today. There are parts of those countries that if you went to Europe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you can no longer go to. And this is where I speak of the disenfranchised. So just think of this number. If 1% of 30 million people don't integrate, don't assimilate, don't take on the language, don't take on the culture, and are radicalized and someone has gotten hold of their brain, what are we going to face in the next 5 years in Europe? My thesis is you simply will not recognize parts of Europe in 5 years, and you certainly will not be sending your kids after they get an MBA to tour Europe in the way you did in the past. And if you're going to send them properly, send them prepared. Cyber. 30% of this room is hacked or penetrated right now, and you don't even know it. I cannot, in my world, go more than 6 to 10 days without one of my clients having a major cyber issue. That is the pace of what's happening. No one is thinking through how they set up their cell phone, how they use Wi-Fi, how they travel, what computer or cell phone you use when you go to a foreign country. If you use Wi-Fi when you log into a hotel, you are wrong. If you use Wi-Fi when you go to Starbucks, you are wrong. You are just opening every single thing in your life up to someone who is sitting in that room that has replicated the hotel Wi-Fi page, the Starbucks Wi-Fi page. You're not actually logging into that institution. You are simply logging into their machine sitting 10 feet from you, and it starts. As a business leader, if you allow your employees to travel with company phones and company laptops, and you don't have policy on what happens with those hard drives when they come back, it is inevitable you will be hacked. And this is only going to get more difficult and more difficult and more difficult. Everybody wants the easy button on cyber. They want to buy software and think they're going to be secure. That will never happen, ever. Until you train your people properly, you set up your systems properly, build the right policy, you're going to be hacked. It's not going anywhere. The United States, everything about this is now the New World Order. We talked about millennials a few minutes ago. That is the United States. Every element of this is around you 24/7, and there's almost nothing I cannot find out about you through the open web, through these systems, and through the dark web. I have clients that have had to sell homes, airplanes, flats, businesses, and get it all their name because they just continually are targeted. That is the new world we live in. Your children, if they have 10 hours of FaceTime on their phones and computers every day, are forecasting about you, your family, what you're doing, where you're going, how you're doing it. It makes you a target. Last slide, we'll come back. Mexico, we're close to it. There are 7 primary cartels that run it. If you watch Colombia last year, Colombia actually created the FARC, the largest cocaine movement business in the world, and recognized them as a political party. That will work in Colombia. I spent 6 years of my life going in and out of Colombia and Panama in the late 90s. That will work in Colombia. Colombia is more safe than ever before. In Mexico, if we ever did that, this would be a failed narco state forever, and we will never get it back. I could spend an hour talking about how the cartels are nothing more than a business. This is a $435 billion business globally, as we legalize marijuana, which this country will do, whether we like it or not, they will simply come off of marijuana, go to crystal meth and heroin, and now we have more Americans dead in 2017 than died in Vietnam. That is a fact. More Americans OD'd on heroin last year in this country than American soldiers died in 7 or 8 years of war in Vietnam. It's staggering. Russia, I'll make one comment. Russia is dying, it is broke, it is drunk, and it is poor, and it's tied to oil and gas. There are risks there that have not been there before. They are not the boogeyman we put them and create them to be in the news cycle. And yes, they are leveraging unconventional warfare in a way we have not seen. But could they ever take on and actually do anything and be expeditionary for an extended period? The answer is no. I'm going to go back. Crystal ball. I'll hit a couple of highlights. Some of this you will like, some of this you will not. We talked about Mexico. Venezuela is a failed state. Just think of it as Somalia in our hemisphere. It is both an opportunity and a very, very negative sore spot in our hemisphere, and what we do with it matters moving forward. Africa and Mexico. As China creates a middle class, 3 things come with that middle class. They want to eat beef, they want to drive cars, and they are no longer going to settle for being paid $1.50 a day. The labor market of cheap labor and products will start to shrink. Therefore, your CFOs and COOs will come to you and say, we should move into Africa. We should move into Central South America. And it will look great on a spreadsheet. As you do projections, that is coming. I have clients that want to get into Libya so bad right now, they bother me every month. I have to talk them out of it. The simple reality is people have to account for the culture and what's happening within that society, and that's where they fail on the business side. European Union, I don't know that it survives. Germany will shrink. It can't afford to hold up Europe. Its time and its shelf life is limited. Turkey, this is probably the most doubtful statement I'll make on stage all day today. I am very leery of Turkey now. Erdogan has consolidated power. He has radicalized that country, and it is the gateway to Europe, and we, the United States, need it. And we've got problems there, problems that we have never had before. And as we talked about some of these groups and organizations that are going in to do great work there, be very prudent in Turkey, because if you get busted at the border with something that they don't like, it's going to be very difficult to deal with that situation in Turkey as they've radicalized. I pray that the Iran nuclear deal holds. Politically a bad deal, admittedly, but we're at where we're at. Ultimately, do I think the Middle East is on a path to go to war and has a Cold War going on right now? Today, I do. And I think that path is going to accelerate every year. India. And this is the one I really get nervous about because I've had a lot of problems with clients in India. Ultimately, India's caste system will disappear because of the internet and cell phones. And it will create problems that we've never seen. And here's the problem. The United States loves India. We love cheap labor. We love educated populations to run call centers for us. And ultimately, you've got a huge problem in India, and it's going to get worse over the next 5 to 10 years. Ultimately, as dark as all of that sounds, without question what you do in this room matters. Without question, the United States of America is still the greatest country in the world, and we have a huge potential future to be very bright moving forward. But open your eyes and open your heart to the realities and be prudent as you move forward through this new generation, through the new world order, as I call it, because it matters. And I don't want you to have to call me after it's too late and you've now got a problem that we can't get out of, whether it is within your family or whether it is within your business. And that is all my message is to you, is be prudent and open your mind to the reality of what's going on around you. It's hard and it's difficult because we all live in a bubble. I live in it too. Ultimately, I really enjoy this group. I love supporting it. And as you go through these things and you have challenges, reach out to me. Thank you.
Dale has offered his services to many of the ministries that have actually presented today. So, we all know that we're surrounded by the Lord, and that you know, he has the ultimate sovereignty over our life, but he gave us a brain to think with as well.